Hey, welcome back, everybody, to BackTrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I am one of your hosts, Goody Caliban. Your other host is right here.
Hi, I am Gooey Proctor.
It gets that nice and clean. I like that. Goody gooey would be kind of weird.
Oh, yeah.
We are part of the Just Enough Trope podcast network, which is home to many shows about your favorite topics like TV shows, movies, comic books, video games, and music. You can find out more by going to Just Enough Trope or by following us at Just Enough Trope on Twitter. Keep the geek fires burning. All right, we did it.
We're here.
We're here. We're literally
physically
here. Yeah, this is our first in-person show.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, we only had to drive a little way to make it happen. But
but we're going to do this now every other week or so,
yeah, right? So I
so
hope you got a taste for pizza, deep dish pizza, because now it's going to be on for good.
we could meet up somewhere in, like, Wisconsin
I'm trying to think. There is an app that I have a friend who's real fussy about driving places, even though I live in the cool part of town and he lives in nowhere.
Oh, sure.
But so I got this app that's like, meet me halfway. And it literally tells you the literal point and then it also finds anywhere that you can conceivably meet. So
that's
it'll
a good
start
idea.
with coffee shops, but it'll go down to like a BP if it has to.
Wow, okay.
And that's good for, meeting reluctant friends and for like trying to sell things online.
Okay,
If you're
yeah.
gonna sell like a computer or something like that. That way, it's like,
Good
do I come to
Craigslist
you? Do I
aggregator.
want this? Do I want this stranger to see where I live? That's always a good move. So, you can just pick some parking lot somewhere.
That might be good for... I think I'm your friend, because I live in Elgin, Illinois, and my friends who I have known from living in the city are like, let's meet up. And I'm like, I don't want to go into the city right now.
Train and
Yeah, it's,
right.
it's too much of a hassle. Let's meet in Schaumburg,
Yeah.
basically.
Where I'm from, we don't have toll roads.
Oh, yeah.
Probably because I see it as like at some point, probably back in the 19th century, some guy was taking his load of fine goods to market, and somebody's like, "Hey, give me a quarter," and then that got written into the laws, and now you could try to say, "Hey, it's inconvenient to have a pass or pay tolls. What if we just put it into the gas tax or the whatever else like other states do?"
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you guys would be like, "Fuck no, we're
Yeah.
not doing that," even though it probably is about the same. Whereas, like, where we live, our gas tax is pretty high and our road tax is high. But if they said, hey, what if you just drop a couple quarters in? We'd be like, no way.
Sure, yeah. It's just
government
changing whatever you're used to.
Moves slowly, yeah. And the wheels turn slowly. And that's a pretty good segue into what we're going to talk about today.
Totally, yeah.
But we're not going to take it. We're not going to take that exit. We're going to keep going. I will say that the roads, when you drive into Illinois, you immediately know you're in Illinois because the roads are immaculate. They're well lit, they're huge, they're clean, there's no potholes, and so you see where all that money goes.
Yeah.
The L train, on the other hand, is a little different.
Okay, yeah.
Because all the road looks amazing, and then you drive by the L train stations, which at this point have to be pushing 50 or so.
Uh-huh.
And the concrete's not great, and the
Right.
tile is from like a Martin Scorsese movie, and
Well, it also depends on, like, the parts of the roads or the L train that you're like. So the one you took in, that's also probably like for a lot of commuters or whatever.
Yeah.
But then if you go to like the more like poorer neighborhoods, it's like that stuff's way more under service
for sure. Yeah,
But then there's also like, I remember a couple of years ago they got some of the more prime L train lines. So they got some new trains and stuff like that.
That's cool.
So. Yeah, it depends on where you go, but yeah, in general, some of those L trains are kind of a bummer.
I'm sure they run fine. I mean,
Yeah.
they have to, but we're just getting like public transit and trains where we live, and so everything is kind of bright and shiny,
cool.
and people don't really trust them just yet. I mean, a lot of people commute on them, but otherwise, it's just actually the big problem is drivers aren't used to them, so there's a lot of like trains running into cars because they don't know what these huge flashing lights mean. Like when the train is going to slowly roll across the intersection and just gently push this car out of the way.
Oh yeah, it's. I guess we're probably used to it, but you did make me think of like just those minor changes. It's like people are, I think, inherently distrustful of Illinois government. We have like pretty bad track record of mayors and governors in Illinois. So
yeah, well, A lot of construction gets done, though.
Yeah, that's fair.
Way to bring it right back. You're on
sorry.
task, so not trusting the government. Well, once again, we'll take another little detour. Let's talk about some of the news that's in Trek right now.
Oh, yeah.
I think probably the biggest thing to talk about is the news out of New York City Comic-Con. More specifically, the trailers that were released.
Yeah.
Trailers for Picard and a trailer for Season 3 of Discovery. You saw those, right?
Yeah, it's kind of shocking because we were talking a couple months ago, like, what else do they have left in the tank?
Yeah, what can we see at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've talked about this a lot because of my other podcast, but what'd you think about the Picard trailer?
That was cool. Especially because it had some nostalgia in there that really got to me, like the little hand tap on Riker when he had his arm around him.
Right,
I died,
right.
But then it also had a lot of stuff that's like thought provoking and like who are these characters going to be? So
Yeah.
I pretty much agreed with what you were saying on your other shows. Where it's like,
yeah. I should put a short plug in for Discoverage, our Discovery coverage show where we talk about episodes of Star Trek Discovery. Usually, literally after they come out, like in an after Trek sort of environment, after it airs on Thursday nights on CBS All Access, we talk live, me and my co-host Ella, about that episode. The short Treks, we're doing it a little more relaxed. They're talking about them. It's coming out a couple days after, and we'll be talking about The Trouble with Edward coming up this week.
Yeah, I just saw that this morning. I
Okay.
didn't watch it, but I was like, "Oh, this is out now."
No spoilers because I'm waiting.
I didn't watch it because I had remembered you saying you weren't going to.
But you did see the one that came out recently, though, right? Q&A.
Yes,
Yeah. What'd you think?
I felt similarly to what was being talked about on your podcast.
Stealing all my stuff.
Your co-host was saying like the dialogue, it didn't really click with me, I guess. It was interesting to watch and it was, entertaining for 15 minutes, but I didn't leave it being like super excited about it or anything.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I fully understand just from a screenwriter perspective, like what they thought they were accomplishing and what they were trying to do. Mm-hmm. And these are just short treks. They're just little looks at characters. But, where's the science? Where's the exploration of social issues? Like, what are we trying to really get at in the Trek tradition? Mm-hmm. And, of course, the next one's going to be comedy tribbles with the voice of Archer. So I'm not sure what that's going to be either.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I was sort of like, I'm not sure yet. I really liked Spock in the last season of Discovery, but it was sort of like, with this now it's like we're veering towards the territory we've seen him in.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit like, okay, what are they going to show about him that is going to be like new and interesting to me?
Yeah.
Whereas like Discovery, you saw that because it's like, oh, he also has another sibling you don't know about.
Yeah.
Maybe messes with canon in questionable ways. But it was at least like, okay, I feel like I'm seeing a new side to him. But in this, it was sort of like, okay, I'm seeing him like in a more familiar way. It's kind of fun to see this shiny presentation of it, but I was like, I don't think I got much out of it for him.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because it's the only place they can go. Like, Nimoy has played that character to the hilt, a lifetime, his whole career, taken that character to the end of their lifetime as well. And so the fact that he's a little more loosey-goosey, that he's a little more... He hasn't come down on no emotion just yet. Like, he still is affected by things,
Yeah, yeah.
We see him smile in the original pilot, The Cage, because I don't think the writers had worked out that part of the character yet. But taking that and like putting that in his characterization as a Vulcan, as somebody who the rind on him gets a little tougher and thicker as he gets older.
Yeah.
If they do go forward with the Pike series, I think that's a good way to go with the character.
Yeah, it could be cool. And I'm especially mentioning Pike. Like, that's what I was really interested in as far as like a prequel series going, because we haven't actually, seen much about Pike in Star Trek as a whole, at least in like TV or film, so
right, yeah,
that's like, I'd like to explore that character and the number one character, but like, yeah, that to me, it wasn't like, I'm not super interested in her yet, but the concept is cool.
Speaking of what's coming up in Discovery, what'd you think of the trailer for season 3?
Yeah, I thought it looked cool. Still excited, I guess, to go to a new place with it, like, and where you can't mess around too much and have people complain about canon or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm still just kind of like, I think the show is pretty good. I think this season could be good, but I don't know. I'm just kind of okay about everything, you know.
Seems like you can never escape canon problems. You know, you'd think that 1,000 years in the future is a safe place, but you know, it's still Star Trek. So,
right.
And our characters are from the Federation. So to not have them just fly off into a different show, like how does it relate to their personal histories? And so, yeah, I think as we've seen in the trailer, we'll be seeing, you know, what happened to the Federation and, you know, what that means for our characters on the Discovery, but also how could they affect what has happened in the future. And so
it made me think of like one of the big scenes before the final battle at the end of season 2, where all the characters kind of like monologued a little bit, like wrote letters to their families and stuff like that. But like most of the characters we were talking about, like, I don't know anything about them. This isn't really affecting me in any way. Right. So I'm hoping that like they showed, you know, some extended shots of some of them in the trailer. So I'm like, okay, maybe we'll get to know some of these people more personally.
Yeah, we get to the future and all those people that they were professing their love for and sending these notes to are all dead. So
right.
Just guess it didn't matter, or maybe they find out like what happened to them or something.
One thing that was weird about it was like I was just seeing a bunch of like little blurbs, little quotes from the people talking about, you know, what they're trying to do with this season, and it was a little bit like, I don't know. I was like, I don't need to know what they think they're doing a little bit. I think I kind of want to go in a little bit more like, don't tell me what you're trying to think a little bit. But that's how the marketing goes, I guess.
Well, and that's how the structure of the show goes. Both previous seasons have been like, here's the big problem. We're going to have Star Trek adventures, but we're going to have to loop back around and fix whatever this is. If it's the war, if it's, you know, whatever the signals are. And so I doubt that they're going to completely abandon that for the third season. But I would like a couple episodes of just, where are we? Like, what is even anything now?
Yeah, it's probably just a hard thing. I feel like that's always just a hard thing for a show like Star Trek.
Yeah, how many Starfleet officers know the date of their own death, do you think? There's so much time traveling around. And you end up in the future, and it's like tempting, and you go on like future Wikipedia, and you're like, I wonder what will happen to old Lieutenant so-and-so. And you're like, what happened to me?
That's disturbing.
They have to have a class for like specific. That's what Pike was using when he saw his vision of getting, you know. He didn't even die, but he got melt face or whatever. And he's just like, remember 201, remember, just breathe. You're a Starfleet officer.
That was like,
we all get our faces melted off eventually.
So they should just have everyone do that.
Doing that. We see how every Discovery character dies. Let's get into our featured subject for today's show. The phrase witch hunt has entered into public lexicon as an unfair persecution of a person or group of people. And some would argue that the term has lost its meaning or impact through overuse. But the term has a real-world inspiration in the very real persecution of men and women in history for the social and religious crime, here are the quotes, of being a witch. Witch hunts, that is, the accusation, trying, and often executing of people on spiritual evidence or eyewitness testimony, was a regular or semi-regular practice in Christian nations during the late Middle Ages, the 15th to the 18th centuries. But the creme de la creme, the piece de la résistance of witch hunts, was the prolonged trial and prosecution of over 200 people in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the late 17th century, known colloquially as the Salem Witch Trials, and which served as the inspiration for Arthur Miller's 1953 play The Crucible and the 1996 film of the same name.
Oh, John, give me a soft word.
Abby, I may think of you softly from time to time, but I will cut off my hand before I reach for you again. We never touched.
Hi. But we did.
What some hearts desire, they must possess.
I know you, John Proctor. You love me. Whatever sin it is, you love me yet.
What they cannot possess, they must destroy.
I have a warrant for your wife. For what crime? And what proof? Who charged her? Well, Abigail Williams charged her.
Abigail wants me dead, John. You know it.
This girl is false!
If you cry words against my wife, it will be the end of you.
I am but God's finger, John. If he would condemn Elizabeth, she will be condemned.
In a world ruled by fear,
Judge Hawthorne has condemned 14 more people to the jail and promised hanging if they don't confess.
Confess? To what?
all it takes to be condemned
Anyone breathe a word, and I will come to you in the black of some terrible night, and I will bring with me a pointy reckoning that will shudder you.
is to be accused.
I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil. I saw Cleopatra with the devil.
Crazy children are jangling the keys of the kingdom and common vengeance rights the law. I'm not giving my wife to vengeance!
I never dreamed any of this for you. I wanted you was all.
And is a whore, Mr. Danforth! She thinks to dance with me on my wife's grave. God help me, I lost it!
You will look at me only. In my eyes only.
Now, we shall touch the bottom of this swamp.
20th Century Fox proudly presents Arthur Miller's timeless tale of truth on trial.
Did you see Goody Proctor's spirit?
The Crucible.
I have given you my soul. Leave me my name!
Directed by Nicholas Heitner.
Is everybody, you think, at a basic level of familiarity with The Crucible?
Maybe. I think maybe at least the concept of the Salem Witch Trials.
Did you read it in high school?
I did, but I watched the film last week with Kayla, and they're like, I've never heard of this. So
okay.
I was like, okay. And I even said that. Did you watch it in school? And they said, oh, well, that definitely didn't happen in my school.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought that was one of those. But then again, I hear all the time about various books that were like the standard school stuff, and I'm like, I don't even know what that's about. So.
Right? Yeah. It's one of those things, and maybe it's like an era thing. I feel like after the play came out and was a big hit, and then of course after the eventual sort of disgracing of the McCarthy hearings and the House of Un-American Activities Committee hearings kind of tapering off. That whole, have you no decency, sir, era. I think it suddenly became like a really important lesson.
Yeah.
And so we got to teach our American kids this.
Totally.
And I don't go to high school now, so I don't know if it's, maybe we should do a poll, but I don't know if they're still teaching kids that. I know for a fact that I didn't. I remember that we talked about it, but they never actually made us read it.
Oh, okay.
And that was, I'm trying to think of what we would have done instead, like in a lit class or like a drama part of an English class. So I didn't actually ever read it before I auditioned for it when I was in a play in 1998, 1999.
Okay.
I played Reverend Hale
awesome.
in the play. Yeah.
It's a great role.
It is. I really wanted to play John Proctor.
Sure.
But, I was a little too young. And so that was kind of like, I read the play before the audition and then just doing the play over and over again, getting into it. This was a couple years after. It's probably why we did this play, because it was still sort of on people's minds because of the Nick Heitner movie.
Right.
But yeah, so very familiar with it. And it was putting all those pieces into place because always hearing about, the Red Scare and everything, and how scared people were of communists. And looking back, not at a time where this is going on right now, but more of a, oh yeah, we have to be ever vigilant,
sure.
Right? That this part's over, but this thing could happen again.
Yeah, it always, I guess, because the time we studied it when I was in high school, this was like, it was kind of in the in-between phases of this that you're talking about, of like this, at least where people weren't thinking about it as much when we covered it in high school. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of interesting because it felt so, to me at the time, being young, it felt like a very foreign concept.
Yeah.
And so that was actually what was kind of eye-opening about it, was like we had a pretty cool teacher. It was a pretty good teacher, but also like for anything that had a movie adaptation, we would watch it.
Yeah, that's what you're going to watch.
Yeah, so we did watch this movie, and it was it was very shocking to high school age me, like a freshman in high school, watching this movie, being like, oh my god. It felt inappropriate a little bit, but
and the play is and the movie are very historical. Miller does this in all of his plays, but if you read the text of the play, he often puts a lot of, it's not even footnotes because it just stops the text. So like if you read the Crucible, it's like Act 1, Scene 1, Reverend Paris comes in and says, "Why won't my kid wake up?" Stop. Salem at this time in history was yada yada yada. 3 pages later, It's just a history lesson. Then we get back into the scene. We go on for a while. John Proctor comes in. I don't know. It's these crazy girls are stop. John Proctor was a man who gives you like all the information as you're going, and I think that the real world events, but also that research and the text in the play all went into the film that they made in 1996. The screenplay of which was by Arthur Miller.
Yeah, and that really shows. And what's interesting about it, or like what's cool about it, is I feel like it has that, but it doesn't like, especially because you're not like reading those footnotes in the film, but it doesn't like bog it down. It like they don't sacrifice it being like an interesting portrayal, like a piece of film or whatever.
Yeah,
it's not like they sacrifice just to like be like, oh, guess we got this little detail in here. It just feels like rich, detailed, and it's also like good to watch.
Yeah, and it's funny because the dialogue does feel kind of stagey sometimes. Mm-hmm. There are lines in the play that I don't think made it into the movie because they are a little too declarative or proclaiming of like, well, you're going to do this and this, and I can't believe that. It's a little more natural, but having that sort of weird, wordy dialogue in a setting which is, almost picture perfect what Salem Village would have been like back then. It's a really good juxtaposition. It's like Shakespeare almost. It makes you feel like these are old timey characters, but yet they have this. They're in an elevated time, speaking elevated words about elevated ideas.
The dialogue's like the best example because like they were speaking in a way that if sometimes people attempt that and it's like too impenetrable.
Yeah,
but like this was like. Sometimes it's like, they're saying a lot of weird things, but I
and even
know
though
exactly what
these
they're
cuckoo
saying.
birds believe in like witches and demons, but everybody got like a solid education for the time. Like they were all reading Shakespeare. They all knew their letters. They were all being taught this stuff. If they were at a certain social level. That is.
Yeah.
And I remember reading. I was a big Entertainment Weekly reader back then. And there's a big article on the upcoming Crucible thing. And so they give you all the details about the production. And they literally went and just, built a Puritan village like on the side of this sound or like, swamp or whatever. And so that was all like authentic materials that they used, the buildings and stuff. And then, of course, you've got, as John Proctor, the lead character, Daniel Day-Lewis, who's full-on method at this point.
So
he's wearing the coat everywhere, and he won't talk to anybody. And in between takes, he's like, he took up whittling, so he was like whittling things with like this big knife and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just like, which, I don't know, like as a former actor myself.
You never did any of this?
Well, no, actually I did because of Daniel Day-Lewis.
You're like, oh, that's what you have to do.
But I've done that, and I've not done that, and I know people have done that, and people who haven't done that. And it's really whatever works for you, and that works for him, and he delivers great performances, and so I don't know, give it to him, I guess.
This is probably his first one where he's like fully doing that, or
well,
what?
No, I think the first one was the first Oscar that he won, right, when he played Christy Brown in My Left Foot.
Oh, okay.
And if you're going to play somebody with severe cerebral palsy, you got to do it method, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to play like an old guy who's like a fashion designer, who's a British like you, maybe that's not as important.
That's kind of a chill role, yeah.
Yeah, well,
it's like a hangout role.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just kind of hang out and like say mean things to people. And
he probably,
but he learned to sew, and
sure, really get inside the mind.
He gave himself polio.
Oh no.
So so as this opens, we've got these characters in the play and in the film. You've got John Proctor and his wife Elizabeth, who are basically our main characters here, but there are also people who are sort of standoffish from Salem society. You've got Reverend Paris. Oh, I should say the actors' names too. Joan Allen plays Elizabeth Proctor, an actress who I really think is great.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, did you ever see Manhunter? Michael Mann's Manhunter. It's the first Hannibal Lecter movie.
Oh no.
She's in that. She's really great. But as Hollywood does, when actresses get older, it doesn't have any use for them. So haven't seen her much. Bruce Davison, the ultimate Hollywood weasel, is Reverend Paris.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you remember many things, but he played Senator Kelly in the X-Men movies.
Yes, could not. That's actually, I think, the only reference in my mind that I know him as.
Okay.
I'm sure if you said, "Oh, he's in this stuff," I would know, but that's all I could think of when I saw him in this movie.
Yeah.
And I could only think of when he turns into liquid or whatever.
Yeah, right. He squeezes his head through the thing. Yeah.
I was waiting for that to happen for some reason.
Yes. Who else is in this? Jeffrey Jones is in this. He plays what is it? Putnam, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's the kind of big, rotund guy, red hair. He's also in a lot of comedy things. He was in Deadwood.
This is he looks like
the principal from Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, he looks like a stepdad kind of vibe. Yeah.
Yes, hopefully not your stepdad though, because we all know his legal problems But no more said about that. And of course, Abigail Williams is played by Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
In a kind of early serious role for her.
Yeah, and she's going hard in this movie.
Yeah, she's going hard in the paint. This is after Reality Bites, I think, but around the same time. And it's, I don't think she's done a lot of dramatic stuff up to this point. So this is kind of a big deal for her.
Yeah. I remember this was probably the first dramatic film I saw her in, too.
Sure.
I was a big Beetlejuice fan as a kid, too.
Oh,
so
yeah, of course.
It was kind of shocking. Maybe that was really what was shocking about the film, actually.
And Paul Schofield plays Judge Danforth. And Paul Schofield is just a legendary British actor. He played King Lear for a long time and won many, many awards for that. And I love how he feels like... so I don't know, John Proctor's he's a pretty good looking guy. He's all leathery and windswept and everything. And
yeah.
Kind of like a Hollywood's idea of a pilgrim dude.
Yeah.
Probably have these guys all drank, right? That's the one thing that these Puritans could do is just drink the cider all day. So he probably wouldn't be quite as cut as he looks. But
I think they had to do it though, because his character is kind of a bad dude in a lot of ways, or he's a flawed dude. But it's they position him almost as the hero of the play.
Oh, so absolutely. I mean, he's the one guy who will tell you he's not perfect, and yet he's the only guy who's what's going on here?
So that he becomes likable in a lot of ways.
Yeah, right.
So,
but doesn't start off that way.
Yeah.
But Paul Schofield looks like you could just go back in time, grab some guy in a powdered wig, and just bring him forward. And he is just... He's not I don't know. He's done movies, but he is treating it like a stage thing. A lot of these readings and lines, no modern director would let you get away with when he's just owning everybody in the courtroom scenes. And he's got that one line reading that just has stuck with me for 20 years. But he's like, "Have you seen the devil, Mr. Proctor?"
Yes.
And what are you going to do? Tell him to do a little faster? I don't think so.
No, I mean, because he's just doing his thing and it's working. I mean, I was nervous. He had the vibe of gonna shut down the community center if you don't raise enough money from your big dance or something.
Right? Yeah. And it's also got Punky Brewster's dad. Whose name is George Gaines. You ever watch Punky Brewster?
I'm aware of it. I know the reference, you know, but
this is one of his last roles.
Okay.
And he's another one of those guys who, Winona Ryder's working her ass off in this film because she has to.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not only because she is experiencing all these emotions and she's pretending that she's possessed or whatever, but her bag of tricks at this point, she's young, is small. But guys like Schofield and George Gaines can just go, "I don't know about this, Thomas." You feel, okay, this guy's worried.
It's a hangout movie.
Oh, no, totally. Yeah. They're just hanging out and going we are absolutely in control of this. And then they see wow, maybe we're not in control of this.
Yeah.
And I love that moment they actually added this for the film, Miller did, where Abigail goes to Danforth to say, hey, I think I saw Hale's wife. And he's accepted everything up to this point as like just the way the court works. But he's like, no, you didn't, because we're going to cut this off now. This has gone a little too far.
Yeah. I like that too, because, you know, earlier on when he shows up, it's like, oh, this is trouble, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like, he's never... somebody like Hale is... he's like an innocent, but he's also like a true believer. Mm-hmm. And they set him up... He's supposed to be kind of a Cotton Mather figure. Cotton Mather was like a minister and like a witch hunter, if you will, type guy back in the day. And he really believed in all of this stuff. Yeah. And in the same way would study the devil's books in order to get, you know, more information about the demons and the spirits that they thought existed. But he wrote at one point, like when things were really popping off as far as the trials went, he wrote this letter basically saying, we've got to get rid of the devil. But then he had all these other points that were like, let's not just, if some kid's like, my tummy hurts, let's not use that. You know, and let's try to find some more better evidence. But then the last thing he wrote too was, and the devil's got to go. So it kind of invalidated all the points that he was laying out. Yeah. He's somebody that really did believe that this was a thing, and he didn't want the devil to take over, you know, the new world. But yeah, at the same time, you know, him and people like him looked around and went, this is nuts. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because it's like, from my perspective, watching the movie, it's just like
everybody's a kook
from the beginning, or at least, and you can like see the pressure right away. Like they want people to believe it, that they've been possessed.
Yeah.
So then you can tell whether these people actually believe it or if they're doing it to get out of the trouble or whatever. So it's like from the start, it's like, this is bad. And then that guy shows up and it's like, it's getting worse. Mm-hmm. But then him turning around towards the end, it's like, this is just a mess. You know?
Yeah. And the fact that he can compartmentalize, I guess it makes him a good judge, but so much to know after Punky Brewster's dad is like, oh, Punky wouldn't approve of this. And he's like, okay, I think we got to shut it down. So the girl comes to him. He's like, no, thanks. But then like the next morning, he's like, hey, guy who clearly hasn't done anything wrong, you're going to sign that paper or you're dead, because that's the way the law works.
Right. Well, at least he was upfront about it.
Yeah, well, I guess it ended eventually. Yeah, 19 people down. I've read that it was a very quarrelsome population. There were a lot of disputes. Like we see that one specific thing where the older guy's like, how you doing? And then the fire goes, and then Putnam's like, I just got some land. I'm going to have my daughter accuse this guy.
Right.
They thought that a lot of things were like that. A lot of undesirables in the community. You see this in these little flashes in the play, or excuse me, in the movie. You couldn't do this in the play, but in the movie you can just cut real quick to like, hey, it's the divorced mom. And she's like, get off my lawn, dickheads. And then suddenly, bang, bang, bang. Guess who's on trial? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was, I was reading up more on the witch trials and stuff, or like that whole period of time, and it was interesting because they were talking about like part of it was like a tool to like kind of establish this new social order, both like economic and also if you're looking from like, you know, the gender perspective, like establishing roles and stuff, and all of that is here in this movie. It's like, all right, we're gonna use this to take land from our neighbors, and we're going to use this to, you know, confine the female population of the town.
And even the hero, I mean, Miller makes no apologies for this, but even the hero's plan is predicated on them accepting the fact that because this girl boned him, her argument is invalid. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, the whole time
clearly she's just a jealous
she's a whore,
bitch.
Is what he keeps saying.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, this is the hero.
It isn't that I'm not caping for the devil here, but it's not possible that like they had an affair, but also Mary Warren is sending her spirit out. It's like, well, clearly she wants to bone me again, so this is all bullshit.
Maybe, you know what? It's his wife is the hero of the film. Actually,
oh man, that's the great tragedy of the whole piece. I want to say quick that it's I read that Miller says this in the notes in his play that this isn't a time, this is like the late 1600s, right? And so you've got Salem Village where this takes place, which is I think it's like a town called Danbury or something like that now.
Okay.
And then there's like Salem Town, which is Salem proper. And this happened like in a couple cities in the area. And just the idea that people were contentious with each other. We weren't quite at the point where we really needed each other to survive. You know, like we are, like the Pilgrims get there, the winter comes, the snow melts, half of them are dead. Mm-hmm. It's not that. Like, we're established. The Native Americans, at least in this part, are leaving us alone. We're kind of 40 or so years away from really needing each other. Yet those societal ideas of that forced community are still there and hard to kick. And so you've got any rebels, you've got like a single woman, you know, or you've got a worker, you know, from the Barbados who, you know, is not white, so watch out. Or you've got like a young girl who doesn't necessarily like her job. Like, these are the people who are going to go up on the block because it's like high school to the max. You got to conform and don't step out of line. Because in this case, you will literally die for it.
Yeah, I remember when they were doing like the montage of kind of people going on trial. It was a lot of older, seemingly, I guess, poorer. I mean, it's a small community, but it seemed like the less well-to-do people in the town.
It had to be so hard to be like homeless back then. I mean, that's literally like the alms for the poor thing. Like, I got nothing. I'm not saying it's easy now, but you know, if you have a sign and you stand out on the turnpike, you know, maybe somebody will give you something. So there's a little bit, but these people like have their own families. There's like 8 kids in their family. They have no reason to give you anything. And if you just lay down in the forest and die, I mean, it's probably better in their minds for the community.
Yeah.
So this is a chance to just like clean house, which is kind of like depressing and weird.
Yeah. And that seemed to be more, I mean, this was truly like something that got out of hand, but it seemed like it didn't just end because it was like it got out of hand, but because it also like stopped serving its purpose in a way.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And it was one of those things where I was reading about the people who survived, who were like partially responsible, like later being like, yeah, I'm kind of sorry about that, but it's like, okay, yeah.
And yeah, it just, there was a big economic component of it, but also there's an economic component in it ending as well, because sure, we think of, and this play does play into that a little bit, in that everybody is just like totally cuckoo for witch Cocoa Puffs. But in the real world, a lot of people were like, yeah, get them. They're like, I don't know if I totally believe in witches. And now a lot of people are dead, and a lot of the families were suing the government for either like wrongful prosecution, whatever the current event or current version of that was, or compensation. Like, you hung our dad. He's got 40 acres. We've got no money now. There's nobody to work the fields, so we're all going to die because you killed like our patriarch.
Right.
So there were like a lot of suits like that. A lot of pastors and community leaders from outside towns are writing letters like, this is nuts. One specific guy did the old, like, it's better if like 100 witches go free than to hang one person, you know, who's not a witch. You know, the old 17th century death penalty argument. So it started to ebb after a while. Yeah, just going back to what you were bringing up before, like the big tragedy of the film and the play for me is we set up this amazing duo of Proctor and his wife, and how they are both in their own way the stoic Puritan that we think of. And
totally,
one guy has made a mistake. He did something that he shouldn't have. It's driven him away from his wife. He's repentant, but also she's kind of sorry. And so neither of them are really communicating. And we get to this point where he's raising up a whore. And so he's got this whole thing set up, and it's like, I got it. Now just get her in here. She never lies about anything.
Yeah.
She tells me that haircut looks stupid. she's going to tell the truth. We'll be done. They bring her in. And of course, her arc is the whole time is that she's been trying to like, just help him and not, you know, fuck over all of his efforts. And so she thinks the best thing to do is like to break her rule and lie. And that's like the tragic fulcrum of the whole play. Like, it's all downhill after that.
Yeah.
It's one of the things where you're like, oh no.
Right. But it was like her trying to do like the most heroic
Everybody's
deed.
trying to do the right thing, and it's horrible consequences.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something that felt so like, because there's all this weird, twisty morality to it because we're looking back onto a weird period of time or whatever. I mean, what period of time doesn't have that? But one thing that I thought was interesting was like the movie. I mean, it starts off like, I mean, people are out in the woods doing witchcraft essentially, and then. But it's that's not positioned as like a bad thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean everybody has their own motivations and they're self-serving, but none of them, they're all innocent. Like Betty misses her mom. She's a young child who lives in a dangerous colony, and her mom died and her dad is a jackass. So she's just wants attention, and all the girls, are probably sick of. They've got this teenage rebellion thing. Did you ever notice how many we see a lot of young girls in this colony? How many young boys are there? Because they're all like, I want Jim Jackson. It's like, I want Bob Johnson. They're all trying to get different
Proctor's
boys,
sons?
Or maybe I want Billy Proctor. None of them overlapped. I felt like there was one that maybe overlapped, where maybe two girls are both in love with Bobby Jessup or something like that.
Okay, yeah, I can't
make my spell better.
I can't think of another boy in the play or in the movie, to be honest. So
Proctor's sons are a little too young to be getting into that kind of thing.
They're boring too. Boring sons.
I don't know if
he just reads the Bible to them.
I don't know if it added anything. I also like how semi-abusive Proctor is to Mary Warren, but it's funny at the time, right? She's kind of his de facto ward or daughter because she's his servant, and she's like, you're not going to hit me anymore. I'm a woman. And he's like, are you sure about that? And she's like, okay, I'm going to go to bed.
She was great in this too. I don't think.
Yeah, I looked her up. I can't remember her name, but she didn't do much after this, but I thought she was really good.
She gave an equally intense performance as Winona Ryder, I thought.
Yeah, that other scene where it's after the Elizabeth Proctor lying scene that we talked about, where all hell breaks loose and all the girls, run into the water. That's a great scene for her too, where she finally, we know that she wants to do the right thing and she totally breaks. Yeah. And she's just like, I saw the devil. I saw him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's moments like those, like my whole body wells up.
Yeah.
It's so
watching
intense.
People, being sold out or selling themselves out.
Yeah.
Over desperation. The actress that plays Tituba does a really good job of that too.
Yes, yeah.
Of course, they're whipping the shit out of her.
Right.
Torture doesn't produce any results.
Well, they didn't have the intelligence then.
Yeah, right. They didn't know how to waterboard back then. But any other parts, performances, or things that you can think of that really stood out? Like, it's kind of weird because we're kind of talking about just the idea of the Red Scare. We're talking about this play that was written in the 50s, both in response to the Red Scare, but also predicted the Red Scare. I always knew that Hollywood, in the late 40s, a lot of people in Hollywood were called in front of the, did they say HWAC or HWAC committee?
I don't
right,
remember.
You gotta anyway, House of Un-American Activities Committee. See, that's how long to say.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good.
And a lot of people kind of talked about communists in Hollywood, and a lot of people didn't. And this group called the Hollywood 10 was blacklisted from Hollywood because of not saying anything. Mm-hmm. And this inspired people like Miller to look into this, to create art about it. At one point, I think in 1952, Elia Kazan, who's a famous director of plays and films, was called in front of the committee, and he just bing, bing, bing. He just named everybody.
Yeah.
Got a lot of people in trouble. And to this day, people hate him for that. When he was honored, I think at the 1999 Oscars with a Lifetime Award, everybody's clapping. You look, Ed Harris, arms folded. Holly Hunter, arms folded.
Heroes.
Well, I guess. I mean, maybe he was caught up in something bigger than him, but I understand why you're doing that. Yeah. But he also kind of named Arthur Miller. Frank Miller's not in this yet. He'll be in it in a little bit. And that immediately set him off and went, this is nuts. This reminds me of the Salem Witch Trials. I'm going to go to Salem. I'm going to drive to Salem, do some research, and write this play. He writes the play in 1953. The play is modest success, but a lot of people did see the parallels there. One of the people that saw the parallels were the committee members. So in 1956, Arthur Miller is called in front of the committee to testify.
That's
Guess what he does?
Life imitating art here.
He tells them to fuck themselves, and he says
That's
nothing.
awesome.
Yeah, and he got in a lot of trouble.
King.
He was convicted of contempt for Congress. That was overturned like the next year, so he's okay. But that's already where it's starting to break. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I knew of those two events, but I always assumed that Congress like grilled him, and he's like, I'm going to write a play about this hero guy. It was the other way around.
Yeah.
He became that hero guy after writing that play.
I was going to say he had to have known what he's getting into, but that sounds like I'm like blaming him.
Well, yeah, he's like, I wrote this script. So he goes in, it's like, do I yell, it is my name? Or like, do I downplay it a little? But yeah, I mean, it was ballsy.
Right. That makes me think too, like how, the movie play starts off, like they're out there doing spells or whatever in the woods. And
until Abigail, we're all having a good time. There's always that one person who wants to take it too far, and Abigail just bursts a chicken open.
Yeah, maybe that was too far. I wouldn't do that myself personally. But I like how it, positions that, like I said, as something that, that just happens. And because sometimes people
could be innocent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it probably was. Because I think before this, like when, people were living in more communal type situations, like witches.
Yeah, there's no Tumblr back then. There's no way to express yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And witches isn't like, I think that comes more with the rise of, Christianity kind of dominating that part of the world. But it just makes me think it's like, yeah, I mean, some of the people were witches, but that's fine. It's not they were falsely accusing these people of witches.
They might have been somebody who liked boiling a frog, and big deal,
Yeah.
I mean, for the animal cruelty side, but
that makes me think of, during the Red Scare, it's like, I mean,
yeah,
maybe some people are communists.
And that was Miller's thing. Miller wasn't like wasn't a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. He was just, there was a lot. He worked with the Federal Theater Project. There was a lot of.
Yeah.
We were a lot more open to like socialist ideals back then. As you can see now, our modern world, it's a big stepping stone for a lot of people, or a big hump to get over. But yeah, he went to some things. He's like, okay, this is interesting. I don't think I'm going to contribute, but thank you. Mm-hmm. And now Congress is yelling at him. So I just think it's weird. Like those girls, a lot of them went to such great lengths to avoid, yes, the physical pain of beating, but also the public shaming and calumniation of having done that. Mm-hmm. That was like worse than death to them. They would concoct this huge story, send literal people to their death so that nobody knew they were dancing in the woods.
Right.
With the black man, they always say. It's like, is Michael Jackson out there? I just think that's like how this whole thing starts. And at the very beginning, Reverend Paris is like, somebody's got to go down for this. And he's like, hey, people say that you did something with John Proctor. And she's like, nobody says that about me. My name is completely clear. Mm. Nobody would say shit about me. Which is like, okay, is that true?
Yeah.
She's overselling it a little bit.
Well, she's got to.
Yeah.
It's very intense. I mean, you said like people were more open to like socialist ideas back then.
Yeah.
And that also makes me think, much like, you could probably find one event that's like, then the Red Scare died down or whatever, but it also feels a little bit like it sort of served its purpose, and then like from the whatever 60s on, it was like communists became like an insult for anybody who thinks, hey, maybe we should make society better a little bit. So
yeah, and plus,
it served its purpose, and so it stopped.
Sure. And yeah, right. And like post-war prosperity was in full swing. People weren't really worried about where things were going to come from,
that's true,
because the sort of capitalist complex was in full bloom. You could have a job that you'd work for 40 years and then get your gold watch, and so people weren't interested in those fringe ideas. Two more things I want to talk about before we wrap this up. Did you know that people have theorized of a real biological cause for what was happening to these girls?
I did. I have heard stuff about that, and throughout like various points of like medieval feudal times too, of like mass hysteria and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know like specifics or anything.
Outside of the just sort of general idea of a mass hysteria, which It's one of those things that we can't really pin down or prove or understand exactly what's happening, but we do know that people experience things like this, or them just being really, they need the Oscar for acting because a bird's coming at them or something. People think that it was perhaps grain poisoning, ergot poisoning.
Oh.
There's a fungus called Claviceps purpurea, which grows on rye. And so you get like this, which was a lot of their stuff was rye and barley. And so you get this psychedelic fungus, essentially, that if you let the plant sit, it can grow on them. You grind it up for the bread or whatever. The biological titration, the uptake, for an adult wouldn't necessarily be enough, but for a small-bodied child, it could be affected by this. And so perhaps they were really hallucinating things or experiencing nausea, the pinprick sort of pains that they're feeling. Mm-hmm. I actually, when I took the ACT for college, this was one of the essay questions.
Really?
In the essay portion was like a short paragraph about ergot poisoning in the Salem Witch Trials.
Wow.
And so that's how I learned about it. But
it sounds a little bit like a Star Trek episode.
Yeah, it does.
Like
if Kirk or Picard and company did find like a witch planet, at some point they'd scan the grain, Captain. They would find out that it's some alien fungus that's making people freak out. You see, it's not witches at all. It's just chemicals.
Could never be.
There would never be witches. Yeah. Another thing that I want to talk about, last thing before we get to the Star Trek episode, is a recent film from 2016, I think, called The Witch.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes styled as the Vitch, because they had to do that old-timey typeset, which is sort of like the Crucible from the perspective of one family who is kicked out of, I think it is Massachusetts Bay Colony, not for being irreligious, but for themselves being more extreme than the colony. Like they have their own ideas about what they're supposed to do as far as devotion, goes. And it's weird to think of these people as not Catholic, because when I think of like people that are really devout, I think Catholic. No, these are the people that are like, Catholics don't got it, not enough. Let's sail across the ocean.
Right. That's intense.
There was one guy, let's live in the woods. There's one guy in one of the crowd scenes, and you can't blame extras. They're just trying to help out. But there was one extra that I saw when Betty was going to jump out of the window and that crane shot's going around. There was an extra that crossed himself, and I'm like, no, you got that one wrong.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a thing.
I wouldn't even have thought of that.
Maybe he's a transplant. Maybe he just he's a merchant who showed up to sell him some beer or something like that.
I conflate a lot of that
and
imagery.
he's a Catholic or an Anglican, but no, that's not what it is. But anyway, so in this movie, the proposal is, no, the devil's real.
Yeah.
What if everybody was real? Abigail was actually possessed. They had nothing to do with adultery. Like, what if this family went out in the woods and there are real witches?
Yeah, I kind of love that actually.
And it sounds like a sci-fi, like rubber mask horror movie. The witch is going to come at them at the end, but instead it's still kind of plausibly deniable until people start flying. But
there's like ambiguity of it.
There's a lot, yeah.
And it's not implied, but you could even be like, "Oh, is the end really?" It's
or
it's more metaphorical.
Or is their grain have LSD in it?
Sure,
or something like that?
Yeah. I mean,
but
the
it's
movie
really
doesn't say that.
In those great psychological horror films. It's just about them psychologically breaking down, and turning on each other. And in the same way that the Crucible is about society eating itself or eating parts of itself. That's about like this, just humanity, like this family under stress and just turning and destroying each other. Mm-hmm. And also thanks to the guy on my shirt, Black Phillip.
Black Phillip, nice. Yeah, I love Black Phillip. I like with her the Thomason, is that her name in the movie? Yeah, like she sort of has that same arc almost of John Proctor's wife, where like stuff is just kind of like happening to her in different ways. Like she's just kind of taking a lot of the blame.
I'm doing my best. My brother's perving on me. I'm just trying. My mom is kind of like jealous of me, in a similar way because she's, it's kind of weird, but I don't know. I'm beautiful and she's like getting older and she doesn't know. She doesn't feel as beautiful and.
I like the ending as like.
And the end is she's just like, God is dead, man.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
If that's what you say about me, fine.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, I felt like with John Proctor's wife, of her, she was more like, I'm going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But she went against what she was taught almost.
It's different for everybody, but there comes a point past which it's just enough. Like, you're not going to move me anymore. There's nothing I can do.
Mm-hmm.
At the Giles Corey situation.
I was talking about that movie recently too, because it had the same thing that I loved about the Crucible. I don't know how much work they actually put into it, but the attention to detail made it feel so real.
Yeah.
And people are still talking with this kind of weird dialect, but it's so like every line just hits me, and I love it.
Well, I think that we've covered just about everything. I would definitely recommend this. I think this is a pretty great movie, and I think it holds up pretty well. I mean, it's timeless, so it would be hard for it to...
Could this be a craft to services movie, though? I think I saw that
it wasn't well reviewed?
I think I saw on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's kind of before that time, but I think it had like a 50% or something.
Yeah, I think people would be afraid to criticize it too heavily because of all the big names involved,
mm-hmm.
and just Arthur Miller didn't live too much longer after that.
I see.
But it was probably divided when it came out. Yeah,
sure. Well, I mean, you can't say it's like, you could probably say it's very heavy-handed, or the material.
Talk about more weight. There's a lot of weight in this.
So I'm sure people are turned off by that.
I think the things that are added don't really add anything, like the differences in between the play. There are different sections where you would probably be fascinated if it was real people standing in front of you, but as for a movie, the staging is sort of like... Mm-hmm. Like the scene where the deposition where Proctor brings Mary in, he tells the judges, "Look, we got this whole thing. Can you just hear her?" And then Giles Corey's, there's a little comedy bit about him and his father and the suit or whatever. And then the tone changes fast, and we move back to the courtroom because now you're under trial now.
Yeah,
it's all talking, and it doesn't. I think the director does his absolute best. There's some very interesting and sort of subtle camera moves in some of the scenes, just to kind of keep the pace going, because it's just people talking, like you said. But that's going to turn some people off.
I would say, though, despite even the things where like this is what'll turn people off, I would also...
You'll never get those people who don't want to see a talkie movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wholeheartedly endorse the movie.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazing.
I do too. Well, we'll be back after a word from our sponsors with more BackTrekking.
Welcome to Virtual Theater. I'm Andy Spiteri.
And I'm Gooey Fame.
The day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
If you're a gamer, a movie buff, or both, you're going to want to check out our podcast on video game movies and the stories that shape them.
Luigi, it's a mushroom. Come on.
Trust the fungus.
We let you decide which movies we cover via Twitter poll. So be sure to follow us on Twitter at Virtual Theater X.
Right, you can hear him talking.
Yeah. Pika, pika, pika.
They can't understand me, kid.
And give us 2 thumbs up by subscribing on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The fate of billions will depend upon you. Sorry.
We are a part of the Just Enough Trope Network.
Okay, well, we're back, and it's time to talk about the Trek side of this equation. One of the, in my opinion, biggest tragedies of the Trek franchise is that many people are totally unaware of the existence of a 4th and 5th season of the original series in the form of Star Trek The Animated Series.
So they completed the 5-year mission then, right?
Technically, yeah. I think that DC Fontana, who was a writer and script editor on the original series, was basically in charge of the animated series too. And I think she considers it all 22 episodes, the first and second season.
Mm-hmm.
Second season is 6 episodes. First season is 16 episodes.
Oh, okay.
To be the 4th year of their mission.
Oh, I see.
Maybe leaving room for a 5th year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on StarTrek.com, they consider it to be the 5th year. And the reason that distinction is important is because for a long time, these were first considered canon because they're literally created by Gene Roddenberry,
Mm-hmm.
Disa Fontana, and the full voice cast of the original series, minus Walter Koenig. They were just considered to be canon.
Mm-hmm.
Then once the movies came out, it's like, we can't have like a giant Vulcan and like people are shrunk down and they're like got hairbrushes or something. Like, so not canon.
As if there isn't stuff in like the original. Yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of goofy stuff in the original series. But now that people are more aware of the show and it's available on streaming services and they're seeing it, you're even taking some elements and putting them directly into future projects. Mm-hmm. So the fact that like we never get really any of McCoy's backstory in the original series. A lot of those ideas were scrapped and recycled for animated series. So we found out that, he was divorced. He has a daughter, Joanna, who's an adult from that marriage. And that just becomes like, we lost half the planet in the divorce, in the J.J. Abrams movies. Yeah.
I mean, I've already admitted it, but I've never watched the animated series before this episode, so
I don't know how you would have an opportunity to.
I guess
you're not a con guy.
Oh yeah.
And if you went to a con, you probably would have seen like an old VHS or DVD like rip of the episodes, but they were hard to find up until the point that Netflix just got all the Star Trek shows, I guess.
I have no excuse because that was right in the heyday of I was just binging at almost every series.
Oh yeah.
But I was just like, I don't know. It does. I mean, there are elements of it where it's like, it's kind of cheaply made in a lot of ways.
It's extremely cheaply made.
But, I mean, but at the same time, after actually watching this episode, I was like, this was kind of sick, I gotta say.
Yeah, like famously cheaply made by the Filmation animation company, who has done, off the top of my head, I can't think of. I think like He-Man and She-Ra was like the big other one they did. They might have done some stuff in the 60s and 70s. Nothing's coming to me, but yeah, a lot of like, I've seen this still before, and the mouth is like, well, we've got to get out of here, and it's like that's what's animated, the mouth.
I watched a lot of that sort of era cartoons when I was young, but then I was like also coming up and growing up right when like Adult Swim hit.
Oh yeah.
And that style of animation almost became like, look at how funny this, like C-Lab and
yeah,
stuff like
right.
that. So now it's hard not to even watch something sort of like that and be like, is this supposed to be like a parody,
Right. Yeah. Well, I think C-Lab is literally just like still like paper dolls or cellophane dolls just like talking and then moving around. Well, it was actually fairly successful at the time. It won an Emmy
in
1975 for Outstanding Entertainment Children's Series. And of course, it featured a lot of the sci-fi writers that worked on the original series and some other ones who didn't. Famous people like David Gerrold from the original series. Larry Niven, sci-fi writer Larry Niven, wrote a script for the show. Wow. And just had a real impressive pedigree. Mm-hmm. And it went through like some different sort of forms. It was originally going to be really for kids in that it was going to feature a new ship called the Excalibur that would have a teenage crew.
Oh, that sounds fun, actually.
Yeah, which, okay. But I think they backed off from that, and they knew that like Roddenberry and Fontana wanted it to appeal to everybody.
Yeah.
In the way that the original series did.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are, half hour instead of an hour, and they are missing the sex and the overt violence that a Star Trek episode would have.
Yeah.
And I would say in a lot of ways, maybe cleaner. You cut out that necessary subplot where Kirk William Shatner has to make out with somebody. If you cut that, what do we got instead?
And there's a lot of, I mean, it works in a lot of Star Trek episodes, but there's just a lot of like hanging out scenes almost.
Yeah.
They're building tension a little bit, which it's harder to convey with these cheap animations, but it gets straight to the point, I think.
Yeah. When you don't have, we don't have to give Walter Koenig a line about something Russia, then where can we go with that? And the thing is that like they didn't like hate Walter Koenig or anything like that. They just had a fairly impressive budget for the series, $75,000 per episode. Not a lot, but enough to get the original cast back. But they cut him out. Like it wasn't enough to get him back.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I know didn't James Doohan do like a lot of voices and stuff too? I've heard that. James
Doohan's got to start as a voice actor, yeah. So any male it's sort of like if you ever watch the old Super Friends, any female voice you hear that isn't like credited is the lady that does Wonder Woman.
Right. So they save some money there,
so he's the Wonder Woman of this show, like every alien. Yeah. They did, when they had Mudd on, I think they did get Roger C. Carmel back.
Okay.
I can't remember if they got William Campbell. to play Koloth again, but if they didn't, it was James Doohan.
So, economic there too.
Yeah.
I mean, the ideas are still there. You're talking about the writers that they have on the show. So even with this is the only episode I've seen, but I was like, this is a cool idea. And even if there were parts that were weird, I was like, they went and they made friends with the devil. Like that's sick. Like, and you're saying they cleaned it up, or like it was less like raunchy or racy or whatever. But it's like, here's a kid's show where they're hanging out with the devil.
Pretty much. One of the things about animation that's cool in every aspect is that you're limited by nothing. You can draw whatever you want, and you don't have to like, how do we do the end of the world, or how do we do, whatever. And that's usually used to good effect. A lot of this is like the same backgrounds, only now they're green instead of red.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is kind of like that. But it does take the Star Trek universe to new places that they couldn't have done in the original series. When you lose Chekhov, you get other officers, bridge officers like Emrys, the Cation or cat person. You get Erex.
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy, the ET looking guy with 3 arms.
Yeah.
And you get sort of other characters like that. And you can do things like the Infinite Vulcan, where they meet a 100-foot tall clone of Spock. I mean, they probably could have done that on TV, but you have no restrictions as far as like budget and props and makeup goes.
Yeah, that's like one of the best things about sci-fi or fantasy, anything, is sometimes like or even in horror, where like things that just feel so unreal or surreal are happening, and it can be so like overwhelming in a way. And even in this, where it's just like I will never forget. It's kind of funny, but when I think Bones is like, "Quick, Kirk, use your magic that you know now," or something. And they cut to him, and there's like a rainbow around him, and he shoots a beam.
It's a real like Power of Grayskull moment.
That's one of the best Kirk moments in history, I think, already.
It's more people need to know about this.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about this specific episode. It's called The Magics of Megas 2.
Captain's Log Supplemental. In this incredible universe, it appears to be a part of the natural laws that belief is as potent a force as energy and matter are in our own.
Our universe operates by what you superstitiously call magic. What are you doing?
Learning to protect ourselves, Lucian.
Protect yourselves?
Lucian, do something.
Jim, we need oxygen.
Emergency battery power.
All systems are dead.
And it was a first season episode. It came pretty early in the first season of the show. For people who are unfamiliar, what's the shot of this episode? Like, what's a summary?
They go to a planet where they meet people where magic is real, and they discover that these people used to hang out on Earth, and they interacted with the Salem witch people, and that's when they were shunned from Earth. I don't know.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
The witch trials were real. There were witches, but they were aliens.
Witches are real, but they're aliens.
And so it becomes, instead of being about it sort of became about their prosecution or whatever, or like, let's hang out with people who are different from us or something like that.
Yeah, right. The connection becomes to Salem Witch Trials becomes the Salem Witch Trials was, and I should say that like a lot of this stuff, like there's a great, I think it was the episode that won the Emmy, an episode called Yesteryear, where they revisit the Guardian of Forever from City on the Edge of Forever. And it's this great story about Spock meeting his like young self and sort of saving his life. And there's an implication that it's sort of why he becomes the man he is because he was like helped by a man like that.
Oh.
And the series, the live action series, never went back to the Guardian of Forever. Now, I know that the first time they went there, big problem. You got Joan Collins killed, but it's just a cool idea. And they're always time traveling on Trek. I can't believe they never went back to the Guardian Forever.
That's also one of those things. I mean, it's talked about so much, but it's like, just want to know like a follow up of like what happened there, like what what they do? Do they put like a police tape around the planet or something?
Just a sphere of yellow tape. Don't cross. But like they introduce us to an entire possibility, and they don't ever say when they go to one planet. They say they're going to an alternate universe, but maybe we just visit one planet, or maybe the one planet is the only planet in that universe. But yeah, it's a universe where magic is real. Mm-hmm. And they also talk about how they came to Earth. They went all kinds of places, but they also came to Earth. And there's a suggestion that it's a chariot of the gods kind of thing. Like they might have inspired like our mythology and our ideas of magic. You have just now said, there you go, magic for Star Trek. What do you want to do with that?
Yeah.
Fuck cat's paw. You can do whatever you want. You could have a whole side series of books or whatever where we're like, in a Piers Anthony way, we're combining like magic and technology and Star Trek ships,
which is a thing we've like sort of brought up before as a criticism. Like Star Trek would be like, there are no such thing as
here's
witches.
The energy wave that they're using to make these spells.
Or there's no ghosts, but this was like they didn't.
Hey,
maybe
ghosts.
because they cut it down to a half hour. They were like, we don't need the 15 minutes where like we're looking at it in the lab trying to figure it out. I mean, there's some of that, but not really.
It's real streamlined, So they their last stand on Earth was basically the Salem Witch Trials. Mm-hmm. And so, they're talking to people, they're showing them magic, but then enough was enough. They got put on trial, people actually died, and they're like, we're out of here. They just go back to their own universe. But now that we've gone into their universe, they're like, see how you like it. I got to buckle on my hat now, and you're gonna die.
I do like that it was like we talked about the idea of like, there were actual magic people then, and that wasn't the problem. The problem was that you didn't like them.
Yeah, right.
That's a great message, I think.
And then of course being put on trial is a big Trek tradition, especially in the original series.
Oh, yeah.
And then also we find out it was all a trick. It's like, you passed the test. Like
that's
we were never really going to kill you. We just wanted to know if you could learn to use our powers and learn to accept us. And that's, I think, another thing that's a real Trek trope.
They combined them both.
Yeah, right. Where you get up to a point and they're like, oh, no, we're just kidding. You have passed the test. You weren't supposed to kill the lizard guy.
Well, I guess that goes into like the animated series revisiting things too, like from the original series. It's like, now that we're here, we can like mix and match themes and concepts because we can do whatever we want. That's awesome.
I love that Spock is just, always the number one hero, gets him out of everything. And I love the fact that for somebody who's so cold and logical, again, maybe there'd be a whole act where he's like, I don't understand what's going on here.
Magic,
but immediately he's like, magic works in this universe. There must be laws. It is logical to try and use magic. And so it's like BRB summoning a demon.
Well, in a way, that's actually the most classic Spock thing, is like something that is unexplainable is happening, and he's like, okay, we can work with this.
Also, if you had more time, Lucian would show up as somebody else, and then he would be slightly suspicious or something. We'd hit a point in the second act where they go, what is this guy? And then right before the act break, he would be like, very well, you'll see my true form. And then the horns come out, and then we come back from the break and he'd be like, but it's cool. But in this, he literally just shows up. Hey, what's up? I'm Satan. And I'm shredded like lettuce.
I guess they are. I mean, no, I don't know. I was gonna say they're a little coy about it because they're never like, people have called me Lucifer.
But even for a kid's show, they are like, at the end of the thing.
The end,
they're like, if that was Lucifer, like maybe this is the second time he's been cast out, but the first time he's been forgiven. It's like, is Anton LaVey writing this thing?
I love that line. That's amazing.
It's great, but I just can't believe that wherever this aired, like the censors are like, you telling kids the devil's okay? Come on. What?
I would be interested to know if there's any backlash against this.
Yeah, they bring up the fact, isn't it the judge who's saying like, oh, you're going to trust, because Lucien's on trial too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, would you be as warm and defending of him if you knew that he had maybe been called Lucifer? And Kirk, without missing a beat, is like, we don't care about superstition. You're trying to like persecute this guy, and we don't want that. And it's not like he has to sit and go, oh, he's the devil. Well, you know, those are old. He's like, religion for them is in the past.
Yeah.
Like, they do not even care. They're like, it'd be like if you said, what if he was the evil, what if he was Hades? And you're like, all right, cool. I'm a big fan of Greek food, but that's not.
Yeah.
This is just some guy.
I mean, I guess there's been mixed messaging on that a little bit, though.
There has, yeah. And I think that the original series, often when they approach questions of God or godlike characters or mythology, they do say it's not a big deal, we don't care. But they also tend to reaffirm the sort of monotheistic Judeo-Christian kind of thing. Like when they meet Apollo in Who Mourns for Adonais, and he's like, don't your humanity needs the gods. And he's like, we find the one is enough for us. So it's like, are you monotheistic? Or are you saying we've had enough problems with a Christian God?
Yeah, and I think this is good they do it, but they like try to show like that it's multicultural. So I think of like them being like, today is the Hindu Festival of Lights or something like that in an episode. And it's like, okay, so we see it's just weird because it's like we see the people who are like representing the Federation, like Picard and Kirk, be like, religion, but then it's like we also see like people still practice it and it's normal.
Yeah. And there's a Christmas party on the original series in one episode. It's like,
and there's
what is
the
Christmas?
Chapel where
What would Christmas even be? You guys can have anything, so presents, I guess, well, they have a sentimental value. You're probably against cutting down trees, you hippies. And nobody eats ham. So, what do you even do on Christmas?
Yeah.
Replicate a stocking.
I think you've hinted at the episode a lot where they meet the devil in TNG, and the whole time it's just like, yeah, you think I'm the devil or not? And you're like, you're not the devil.
And the reason that thing works, Devils Do, is that they're never really wondering if this is the devil. It's more just, we know there's no devil, so how is she doing this? Like, it's a really weird mystery for them, because I'm not going to sit and enter. Picard like literally says, look, she's not the devil, but it's a problem that she keeps doing this. So and also we've got to protect this planet, who absolutely believes that she's the devil and is ready to totally give their planet away. And we're not going to be able to talk them out of that. So we've got to crack this mystery of what she is.
Yeah, that's, it's all right. But this was so much more interesting.
And magic duels, too.
Oh, yeah. If Picard had shot a rainbow.
Use your magic. What are you talking about? All right, here we go. I like the idea that Lucien is like them in a way. Like, he is an explorer. He's also somebody in their society who kind of rejects the status quo and is trying to reach out to people, and they, see a like sort of kindred spirit in him. Later on, this show wants to have it both ways, though, because they want to have him be a Lucifer character that's cast out, but they want to have it be a smoothed out kid show ending. And so the end of the thing is like, oh, it's all fine. It'd be like if in Christianity, Lucifer fell from heaven, almost tempted Adam and Eve, and the last minute God came out and clapped Lucifer on the back and went, ha ha, you passed the test, everybody. Gotcha. Nice work.
Yeah, that's another thing, I guess, of cutting the story down a little bit is, that even happens in longer Star Trek episodes too, where it's like, we gotta get to the ending. But that's okay. I think there was so much going on that was like, this does not matter a little bit.
Strong to very strong. Did you get to watch any other episodes of the show?
I don't think I can after that. No, just because it's so good. No, I want to though. Now I think that's definitely something that's going to happen.
I would definitely say check it out. I don't. Now that I think about it, I don't think that they do this theme ever again. This idea of. Because Lucien's also a very like Promethean kind of character, because we don't really get into it because children's show that's 22 minutes long.
Yeah.
But there's this idea that he brought, the magic and like knowledge to an early humanity, and Lucifer as a character is often sort of seen as in a parallel to like Prometheus, a person that would go against the gods. There are some other episodes that deal with godlike stuff. There's an episode called How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth, where they meet a being who claims to be Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec snake god.
That's cool.
And they have to kind of like go, is he, or was he an alien that came to Earth and did that whole rigmarole? And so, yeah, they touched on some tough stuff in the animated series. And then there's the one where they all get shrunk and they have to prop each other up to fire the phasers.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids
they're
episode.
all doll-sized,
Part of me was like, I loved just like going in blind to this and just like experiencing it for all that it was. So I was like, oh, what if we do another episode? I just kind of want to like have that happen, but there's what, 20 something, so I guess
you can get through it pretty fast. Yeah. Well, let's do what we usually do, which is look at the technology of the Trek universe. That's what makes Trek, the Treknology. So I thought we'd randomly pick, as we usually do, from a list of Star Trek technologies. We roll from our list, we add the technology to the non-Trek media, and we take it away from the Trek media, and we see how it changes those stories. It's a technological exchange. And here is the list of our 10 Star Trek technologies. We've got phasers, we've got holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drive, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, and androids. And of course, those all cover... Phasers is like energy weapons. We're not talking about one thing necessarily. So let's roll our real life. It actually exists. D10. What's the number?
That's what is that?
What does it say? Are you not used to read? Oh, okay. Sorry. I should let everybody know. These are Vampire the Masquerade dice.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm an actual nerd. So that is a 1. So that means that we've got phasers and energy weapons on the witness stand.
There's no way this couldn't have been something interesting, I guess.
So if you added phasers to the action of the Crucible, play or film, how would that change things?
Well, I guess that made me think. I guess there wasn't a lot of firearms in this movie.
That's right.
Well, I guess that wouldn't be very useful.
You do see in both this and the Star Trek episode guards. I don't know if they're royal guards or just the local constabulary, and they have the outfit of the time, which I would think would not make a lot of sense. They've got the helmet, like the sort of conquistador-looking helmet.
Sure.
They've got the metal cuirass, and I think they've got like a staff or a spear. And you see that the bailiffs in the Crucible movie have it, and you see them in the background of the trial scene of the Star Trek episode 2.
Yeah. Well, I guess weapons then are like firearms wouldn't be the most useful.
And I don't know how the political system works. I know they didn't have police. They weren't really invented yet. But if those guys, I assume, because where do you get like a 40-pound metal cuirass in the middle of the colonies? Right? That came from overseas. So these guys probably represent the power of the crown, like they are official officers of the crown or of the king. So, yeah, but they've just got spears. Nobody else really has anything. Their muskets were a thing back then. Mm-hmm. I don't know if a poor colonist would have one. So weapons, very limited.
I mean, they enact, violence upon the people, but we mostly just see stacking rocks and, people being hung and stuff. So
I think we've got our first candidate here. You just start blowing toes off, right?
Sure.
So you set it to a very thin beam and you go, all right, Giles Corey, guilty or innocent? What's it going to be? More toes. It just blow a toe off.
Now, maybe they should have had an armed insurrection of the colony. I think
there you go.
They should have gone back in time, go to the Edith Keeler planet. I forgot what that thing is called. The gateway or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Go back in time, give them some phasers.
It totally changes.
Change history. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's got to be some like radical future people who just want to go back in time and help all the oppressed people.
If there was a Time Cop 2, actually there is a Time Cop 2, but if there was one worth watching, that could be a thing too. Like you go from Time Cop 1, he's trying to stop criminals from robbing the past, to Time Cop 2, there's a faction of people that are trying to help the past, and it's like that's also bad for the
Black
past.
Panther.
Trying to we're going to give slaves phasers.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, actually that's not a bad idea, but what would happen to the rest of the world? Yeah. So the whole plan falls apart in the courtroom, and Proctor just grabs Abigail and whips out a phaser, and it's like, let everybody go. or I torch the whore.
Yeah. Phasers in
Indians
in
would not be a problem.
I guess. Well, that's
although
a dark
at some point,
outcome too,
yeah, at some point, assuming they survive, you start trading with Native Americans for goods. So now I'm seeing like a bunch of plains Native Americans hunting buffalo with phaser rifles.
I like the idea of that's like the only thing that comes of it. Like they never figure out like how they work. So like everything goes as normal, but people have phasers now.
Yeah, they're well mates. You can hand it down through the generations.
Yeah.
This was your great grandfather's phaser
They
rifle.
don't rust or anything.
Use it well. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, with a setting where there's no real application for weapons, I'm not sure what you'd do.
People might be less freaked out by like the guy who like seemingly made like that fire, with magic. If you can just like phase something.
Yeah, that's what a piece of shit Putnam is that there's. I mean, you've never made a fire before. There's like different kinds of wood and there's moisture in it. Like that happens when you make a fire. But he's just like, I've got it. It's like, that's what you've got? And then, of course, he's got the magic child who can just tell them, guy's a witch.
Yeah, they've got garbage tech, clearly.
Yeah, phasers would really change things and turn it around for them. What if we took phasers away from the magics of Megas 2?
Does the magic beams count? Can Kirk summon?
Well, that's magic.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. No, they didn't really. There wasn't a lot of phasers in this one, I guess.
This is another rough one, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Because phasers, there's nothing that I think could really phase the magic dudes.
If Starfleet, that is, never possessed the technology for phasers, how would that change their voyages through the universe?
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess, I mean, they talk about on the show a lot how, they're peaceful, but still there are times where they've got to use them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like it would be impossible to make any headway into other alien territories, right?
Well, you've got maybe the photon torpedo would have been developed a lot earlier. Maybe they'd come up with some kind of net that you shoot at the other ship.
Maybe a net. I was gonna say a bayonet that you could just put on
a big knife taped to the top of the ship.
Yep.
Now, if these are connected, because of course one of these things is referenced in the other, so if we did give phasers to the Massachusetts Bay colonists in the 17th century, how would that change the episode, The Magics of Megas 2?
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Like, they wouldn't have had to leave.
I think Asmodeus would be blowing some toes off with a phaser.
Well, there's the twist of it where it's like maybe the aliens, they become the bad guys at this point because they've almost... it's like, it seems like a good idea. Like, let's go back and help these people. But now aren't you just you've become the colonizer in a way, right?
Yeah, I guess.
If they're there, well, I don't know who's bringing the weapons back, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, right. Well, we are. We've decided that we are giving phasers to the colonists. Maybe they make short work of the Megans, I guess they're called, and then there's like very few of them left. And so when the Enterprise decides, we never talked about this. There's this idea that they have, which might have been kicked around in real life in science, that like if the universe is expanding, is it matter being continually generated? We know that is not true. But so they go to the center of the galaxy and they're like, They just write off. It isn't like we're about to find out. Oh, we're sucked into magic land. They're like, we found it.
Yeah,
it's a bunch of firework things, but like matter is being created. Amazing. Oh shit, Satan's here.
Yeah.
So maybe they get there to do that, and Satan wants revenge because a bunch of pilgrims 800 years ago killed all of his wizard friends.
Sure, yeah. You know what? That makes me think, though, doesn't his, like, because Satan is an older concept than...
Oh, yeah.
Than so...
I mean, he appears as Pan, which, inspired the sort of modern look of Satan.
Yeah. So, I guess they probably didn't think that much, but it was like, it seems like a very specific time period...
Right.
For him to have that version of him. I don't know. I guess I don't know.
He just Black Phillip shows up. He's like, "What's up? Welcome to the magic world."
That'd be pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I think this is definitely comes down on the softer side of canon because I don't think they're going to go with all matter in our universe comes from a magical universe.
No, that
Satan
would be
is in
so
charge
cool.
of.
That would be so. That's
like a Warhammer thing.
Star Trek is already like one of my favorite things, but I think that would just make it the greatest of all time.
All right.
Of science fiction, and that magic is the center of everything.
Well, that wasn't 100% a wash, I guess. That worked out okay. I think that's it for this week. Should we tell people what's coming up on next week's BackTrekking?
Oh, yeah.
And it's an important announcement because it is the completion of the poll that we had.
Yes.
This is a different thing for us. We decided to let the listeners decide what we're going to do. And we got a lot of responses.
Yeah. So we found out that people really like Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I think. Is that what's going on?
And so that... we'll always have Paris, the episode from the first season, 1, and I don't even what is that supposed to connect to?
Oh, it connects to specifically where the line "We'll always have Paris" is from the 1942 film Casablanca.
Oh, okay,
which features there's a departure, but there's a clear inspiration. It features 2 old lovers, one of whom is now with somebody else. That is something of a rival for the other guy. Picard is Rick in this situation.
Yeah, so that should be pretty fun.
Although we keep going back to World War II.
Yeah, World War II, and also like Red Scare a little bit, or like
slavery. There's a slave in this.
Yeah,
World War II, Red Scare.
Yeah, well, I guess Star Trek. That's like the period of time that they're still thinking about, the Cold War is going on and stuff like that. So we're going to be thinking about, and we're still thinking about like, wow, wasn't World War II crazy?
Oh, nuts.
So
there's so much going on.
Yeah.
I want to do something like ancient Egypt or
it had to have been a thing. Right?
Yeah. Or like, I don't know, gauchos in South America in the 19th century or something like that.
Yeah. Or what?
Where can we take this thing?
There's got to be. Kayla has compared some episodes of Next Gen that we've watched to Wishbone.
In that they're like stuck in like a literary or like a historical situation.
Yeah. We watched the most Wishbone of all episodes, which was Time's Arrow, where it's like,
oh, that's pretty Wishbone.
What if we're in the Mark Twain days? Right. So I'm hoping there are some that are like, let's go to. They never go to ancient Egypt or anything, but
no, but yeah. I mean, what would? I guess Stargate. We just switch this to a Stargate podcast.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's something that I've complained about or just pointed out for Star Trek, that it's such a 20th century show because it was created by men that fought in World War II to be about the present Cold War conflict and nuclear armament and acceleration.
Yeah.
And now that, the more things change, but which is that also the title of one, I think? But now that, we're in the 21st century, the problems are a little different. And when they try to write Star Trek, they tend to kind of write it the same way. And I'm not
even in the Q&A short Trek, they're like referencing that song. And
I know.
I was so embarrassed watching that.
Yeah,
honestly,
well,
a little bit.
Yeah. But, they're going to have to find a new way forward, I think. I don't think you can keep doing this unless it becomes a total nostalgia piece. Like the way that like Saving Private Ryan appealed to people but it's bloodier, but it's very much like those old 40s and 50s war films. And I just don't think you're going to be able to do that for much longer.
Isn't that's kind of what like Tarantino wants to do a little bit too, right?
Yeah. Oh, speaking of animated, what do you think about the Lower Deck series?
It seems like a cool idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. The animation looks all right to me, but
I'm not sure if a Aqua Teen kind of setting or milieu will help or hurt Star Trek. I think Star Trek takes itself very seriously, and if every episode was just like, the planet blew up, whatever, and we just move on, and there's no morality, like in the way that like a Rick and Morty, there's a morality in there somewhere, but it's a very sort of nihilistic look.
Mm-hmm.
If you could do that in Star Trek, or you could have it be kind of goofy and fart joke and slip on a banana peel, but at the end of the day, it's sort of like friendship, or do you know what I mean? Like have those same sort of moral lessons if they're going to just drop that.
It makes me think of maybe like the first season of Discovery was like kind of trying to cover war things similar to like later seasons of like Deep Space Nine covered war in a way where like here's like the darker side of the Federation, but the difference was that like I think people were like there's sort of a core of Deep Space Nine that like people were used to the Star Trek element of it.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit more shocking to like jump in right away with Discovery and be like, this is something super different, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if like, you know, if the show started off as more like a nostalgia cartoon and then went to weirder places, maybe. That's what I'm thinking is like, is it going to be, I might be into it being super different right away, but I wonder if a lot of people will be like, this isn't Star Trek, you know?
Yeah, it would be cool to see a cartoon play the long game like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think cartoons more than any other kind of TV are really predicated on it being this. You're being served the same thing every time.
Yeah.
And even early Rick and Morty had no real progression in terms of overarching story. They've been getting into that more, and now they know they're going to go another 7 years. I'm sure they'll create some huge like arc that goes through the thing now. But yeah, it'd be cool for them to just go, hey, we're having fun, everything's goofy, but yeah, we're trying to tell like a story over successive sequel episodes or seasons.
Do you remember Moral Oral, that show?
Yes.
That started off as like tongue-in-cheek parody of the shows, and then like later on it was like got way wilder.
Yeah, and I haven't actually got to the wild part yet.
Oh, okay.
I've seen like most of the first season, and it is just here's the new kind of hypocritical, stupid idea that we're gonna have Moral get himself involved in. So the Moral Oral Star Trek
I didn't expect to be talking
crossover,
about that, but okay.
Oh boy, we're gonna do that one. I gotta look and see if any Moral Oral episodes are based on Star Trek at all.
Oh yeah, that's gotta be something.
And that's it for this week's BackTrekking. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, tell a friend. You can follow us at BackTrekking on Twitter, and tell us too what you think we should do in future episodes. We'll probably, not for the next week, do a poll, but probably in the future, as long as you guys keep picking cool episodes to talk about. Maybe no World War II next time, just a note. But yeah, we appreciate you letting us know. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Gooey, tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter at GooeyFame.
And I am at Caliban, that's K-A-1-I-B-A-N on Twitter. And you can find Just Enough Trope, the network, at Just Enough Trope on Twitter. That's it for us. We'll see you soon, and keep on trekking.